So hello, thank you for coming. I think I've met most, if not all of you. If I've not, then hello, I'm Will. I'm one of the psychologists who's been doing a bit of the staff support stuff into A&E.
Ben, same job description.
So we work in the neuropsychology department as part of our kind of normal role. The A&E work's been a bit of an add-on thing for us in response to the whole COVID thing. So really today we kind of, I think this came about quite organically just through conversations with a few A&E staff. Just a lot of the things that people will come and talk to us about while we were here were kind of around difficult situations or things that have cropped up. So we just suggested to a few people that it might be helpful to just have a bit of thinking time around kind of what we mean by debriefing, what some of the things to kind of aim for are, and what some of the things to avoid are. So we've prepared a bit of a PowerPoint. It's probably going to be a bit of an informal kind of afternoon, but we thought we'd whiz through some slides, talk you through kind of a common model that's useful, and then we're going to have a bit of like a demo role play kind of thing at the end so you can sort of see it in action. And we hope that'll feel like a useful introduction to some of these ideas really. But I'm going to talk to you a bit just about background stuff first. So just we wanted to acknowledge really, we're not going to go on about this, but just wanting to acknowledge that there is a lot of history around, I guess quite controversially, the topic of debriefing, and I think quite a bit of debate about whether we should debrief at all, whether it's actually harmful, whether it does any good, whether it's effective, or whether it can actually be detrimental for people. I think one of the main things trying to now pull together a kind of a bit of a consensus, one of the main concerns was about the idea of re-traumatising people, and I think that's something that we really want to hold in mind, that if we are doing any kind of debriefing, that we definitely don't want to make people feel worse than when they came in. And there was research quite a few years ago now, but that kind of led into the inclusion in NICE guidance of a recommendation of not doing single session debriefing after some sort of post-traumatic incident. And that was basically in response to the research that was saying this could actually be quite harmful. We kind of recognised that the evidence around that was pretty low quality in both directions, so the picture still isn't very clear. But I think that's fueled the kind of controversy and the debate around whether we should be doing any sort of debrief or not. The model that we're going to kind of focus on today, the critical incident stress management model, wasn't covered within that review process, and neither was the concept of psychological first aid, which again is a sort of similar but related construct. And those are the ideas we've drawn on today. So we hope that, or what our aim is today is to kind of give you some transferable ideas, focus on the stuff that should be helpful and that should be useful, but also trying to bear in mind some of the caution that we just need to be really careful about doing this in a sensitive way to avoid the risk of, or minimise the risk of making people feel worse. Okay. Just to say as well that the evidence base around these approaches that we're going to chat about today is predominantly around group work, but there's no reason why you can't adapt some of that for one-to-one conversations, but we're thinking predominantly about group approaches. So. Okay, so this was in the paper after the Manchester Arena attacks, and so Simon Wesley kind of talked about how not everybody who's been through a trauma needs counselling or specialist psychotherapy. He talked about one of the most important recommendations and pieces of advice he gives is about encouraging people to do what they would normally do, to talk to friends, to talk to family, and to avoid professionalising or medicalising people's distress. What is a very normal response doesn't necessarily need to be medicalised and treated. And I think we've been sort of quite cautious about this with the staff support stuff we've been doing in A&E, because the last thing we wanted to do is to come into an MDT or a huddle and sort of say, right, you've all now going to get depressed or you're all going to get PTSD. That's not a helpful response, but just us being there as psychologists sometimes confuses that a bit. So again, one of the kind of founding principles we wanted to sort of think of getting out there today was really about just making sure that we're clear on what we're saying, and that in terms of actually helping people through, that the majority of people will recover from going through some sort of traumatic experience by doing the things that normally help them, you know, by talking to friends, talking to family, talking to colleagues, by using their own social networks. And there might be a role for more expertise, for more professional help, for more expert input for some people, but the majority of people will kind of recover well using their normal pathways. If that makes sense. Yeah. That said, there are things that we can all do to help with that as well, and I think this is particularly important for people who are working in kind of management or leadership roles, because after something difficult, it's really important for us to provide general comfort and reassurance, and this is something that goes on kind of quite organically, quite naturally in teams, and hopefully most of you can recognise that within teams this happens just by virtue of being around your colleagues. If you go through something difficult, you chat about it, you talk about what's happened in the corridor over a coffee, you laugh about it, you cry about it, you do whatever it is that you normally do. And being able to, I suppose, recognise and value the importance of just that natural, organic support is again a really big part of what we want to get across today, because that's something that we think it's important to make space for within teams and to really recognise the importance of. And that kind of underpins a lot of the sorts of recommendations and things we've been trying to support across the hospital in terms of things like the take-a-minute rooms or the wobble rooms, in terms of trying to have the sort of phone a friend scheme that Erin's been involved in, trying to get these little things up and running to encourage people to have sort of space to just sort of talk to each other really. And the other thing I say as well is it is about individual choice, so not everybody would want to, and I can certainly speak for myself. After I've had a rough day, sometimes the last thing I want to do is go and talk to somebody about it. We're all different, we're all individual, and I think it's all right to support that as that individual choice in that regard, and whatever we kind of do within teams should be offered with a light touch. I like starting with kind of what not to say, because I think most people can recognise a time when they've heard something like this after they've been through something tough. So if you've ever had a bad day at work, or been dumped, or, I don't know, crashed your car, or anything at all that was a bit rough, a bit difficult, these are things that we tend to say, try to avoid. So, I know how you feel. Well, at least this didn't happen. Let's focus on something else. You'll feel better soon. It could have been worse, or you're so lucky. And I think particularly with, I don't know if you agree, but particularly in the kind of trauma world, I think that the narrative around luck is a really difficult one, because if somebody's been in an accident or something like that, has some injuries, being told that they're lucky to not be more seriously injured or they're lucky to be alive, that isn't always a helpful message to us. So we're thinking about what kind of things we can bring into sort of teams to think about what good messages we can give. Okay. As mentioned before, we're going to focus more on the critical incident stress management model today, but we just wanted to kind of nod towards psychological first aid. So the World Health Organization have published some really good stuff about psychological first aid, and we can send the website around to you all if you want to have a look. There's some really good resources on there. This was kind of developed out of principles around how to help kind of people on the ground in the immediate aftermath of traumatic events. And it kind of, what I really like about it is that it emphasises that normalisation process. It's about providing immediate practical support that people can benefit from, but also really recognising, acknowledging and normalising people's emotional responses as well. So I like this quote: "Even a brief look of interest and calm concern can be grounding and helpful to people who are feeling overwhelmed and confused." And again, I think that's something that happens quite organically and quite naturally in teams, in departments, especially after something difficult. Do not assume people will respond with immediate positive reactions. It may take time to feel some degree of safety, confidence and trust. And again, I think that kind of for me resonates quite a lot with how teams might play out. Sometimes we don't feel comfortable going talking to our manager. We don't feel comfortable going talking to the person who's on charge of that particular shift. There might be people we just relate to a bit more naturally, a bit more easily. Psychological first aid guidance recommends doing things that are active, practical and familiar, kind of trying to get back doing things that are useful. Reassure, normalise, offer space for questions, and as I mentioned on the last slide, considering individual needs and diversity, so the way that we all individually might cope. And that being driven by lots of different things, some of it personality, but also things like cultural differences within that as well. Okay, so that was kind of hopefully a bit of background. The next bit is to hopefully talk a bit more about the critical incident stress management model, because I think one of the common themes that come out of conversations that I've had with staff when talking about these kinds of things is that we know that doing this stuff is important, but it's how do you do it, what does it look like? So the model that Ben's going to talk you through is quite concrete, and hopefully it will mean that you can have a more kind of planned, calm response instead of being like this and just feeling like you're diving in without any real sort of plan for how you're going to do it. All right, hand over to Ben.
Yeah, so what I'm going to refer to particularly is a concept called diffusion, and I'm going to avoid the word debriefing. As Will's just talked about, the concept of debriefing means many different things to many different people. So I'm going to talk about a particular way of working within critical incident stress management that we call diffusion. Now, this is probably quite akin to some of the things you've been talking about in terms of hot debriefing. So this is, in theory, supposed to be used on the day or within kind of an 8-hour period after an incident happened. It doesn't have to be something incredibly serious. It can be anything that's caused a kind of disruption to well-being within a group of staff. It is a group process. As was said, there are adaptations for doing this on a one-on-one basis as well. The evidence base sits within a group process, which is why we train it as a group process. The goals of diffusion is as a crisis intervention. So it's supposed to be temporary, it's supposed to be active, and it's supposed to be supportive. It reduces emotional tension. It's all about stabilisation. It's all about just getting that person back to a point where they feel stable and able to leave the hospital site without feeling overwhelmed, without feeling like they've got to go and can't cope. It's about mobilising personal resources, so getting things moving around people, getting them to re-engage with the things that are going to help them. It's about normalising those reactions. We talked about some of that stuff at the start, and Will's just talked about that in terms of the psychological first aid. It's really about saying to people what you're experiencing is normal, whatever that is. It's about the team as well. It's about keeping that team feeling cohesive. Often when we debrief at times, or when some organisations debrief at times, there can be quite a blaming culture. There can be a looking for something wrong, looking for what we did right there, but also on the undercurrent of looking for what we did wrong there. That's not what this is about. This is about enhancing team cohesion within this. I'll talk about that a bit more. It's also about restoring adaptive functioning. So the whole sort of critical incident stress management model from start to finish actually starts at things like when we have a major incident and we're supporting first responders on site. It's about keeping people going. It's about being able to say to people, let's get you to a point where you can come back to work tomorrow, where you don't feel that you have to withdraw from work and you feel able to carry on. So it's very much about that adaptive functioning. Providing some early psychoeducation and potentially identifying some individuals that may need some more support in a different way. Just some really basic principles. It's about proximity, it's about being there and in and getting in there and doing. It's about doing it fairly quickly, as quickly as you can. Sometimes that's not always possible, and I'll talk about what happens when that's not possible in a little while, because it's just sometimes not. It's simple, it's brief, innovative. It's about doing something a little bit different to what you're not necessarily used to. We'll take elements of it, but some of it will be novel, and it's about being pragmatic. What can we actually access? What can we realistically do? Not setting an unrealistic target for anybody to go out and do. You'll be familiar with a lot of these. So some of the key symptoms of traumatic stress that we see after an incident is that kind of hyperarousal. That's got physical and cognitive effects. So people will feel jittery, people will get that adrenaline rush, people's minds will be racing, they'll be a little bit all over the place, the concentration will be stuck. People will go through re-experiencing, and we re-experience because what the brain is trying to do is prevent something traumatic happening again in future. All our brains know, for all the wonderful complexity of our brains, they're actually very simple in terms of threat, as you'll be very aware. When we experience threat, it only knows one thing to do, and that's to replay it and replay it and replay it, and also do the what would have happened if, what would have been different if I'd done this. And what your brain is doing there is trying to relive the event so that you can prevent it happening again in future. And that's what's happening, and normalising that for people and saying, actually, that's an incredibly normal process to go through because your brain's trying to keep you safe can be a huge thing for people. There's also a link there to this, without going too neuro about it, there's a link there to the different kinds of memory processing that happen, and often during a traumatic event we go through this amygdala memory processing, and actually that's when people process a lot of the kind of sensory information. It's about getting in rapidly and laying down a memory without lots of the contextual stuff, without the detail, without all those sorts of things. And part of this model that I'll show you in a second is about trying to shift that slightly back into hippocampal processing, which is all about the detail, the accuracy, the facts, those sorts of things, and that can actually help to take it from the traumatic into something less traumatic for people as they process. And you'll see this avoidance, numbing. You'll look at those safety behaviours, risk behaviours, that kind of self-medicating, that isolation, those are things you'll start to see in people. Obviously that tends to come a little bit later, you'll see that, but what you will see early on is sometimes that numbing and avoidance. So diffusion comes in 3 phases. It's an introductory phase, which is just about introducing yourself, the process, reducing any anxieties about what's going on. I'll give some more detail on this in a second. It's then an exploration phase, which is about a brief discussion of what happened, the experience, the story of the event, and a little bit about the emotion of the event. And then it's into an information phase, which is giving information, normalising, a little bit of psychoeducation, some guidance, some practicalities. What you're looking for in this, which is highlighted there, is this cognitive, affective, cognitive, thinking, feeling, thinking, is what we're going through here. We're going to start people off with a factual thinking approach. You're moving them down into a feelings approach to give them space for that, and then you're moving them back gradually and gently up into the thinking phase to draw them back out of that emotional phase. This is just it laid out in a kind of diagram for you, which is really straightforward. So all you're doing is that introduction, down through that exploration phase, so a factual exploration phase, through to a feelings exploration phase, and then back up to draw people back up into that kind of cognitive approach. This whole thing should take somewhere between 10 and 30 minutes. It's not a long process. It's not a long thing that you're expecting of people. This is actually designed to be a very brief, short process and to get people back out and feeling able. Through this introduction phase, this is just, I won't go through all of this in massive amounts of detail, this is for you to take away and we'll send you some information as well, but you're just introducing, you're talking about confidentiality in the way that you always would. You're describing this as as not investigative or critical. This is not about getting to the bottom of something that just happened. This is just about allowing people the space to be able to talk. The purpose is just a welfare check, it's conversational, it's not blaming. You're trying to motivate the participants to support each other as a group. You're highlighting those bonds as a group, you're looking for those bonds. No one's forced to speak. You'll probably find within the groups some people more willing to speak than others, as you will find in most staff groups as you get people together. There's a fine balance to be had there. Actually, you want to use those people. You want to draw on those people that you know might be willing to speak a bit more. You might glance at them. You might kind of do that encouraging thing that you might do in a group, whilst also having a little bit of an awareness if you've got people in the group who are likely to dominate that discussion and how you might kind of nudge them or nudge other people just to kind of say, you know, that's a really helpful contribution. Has anybody else felt anything similar? Doing that sort of opening it out to the group. And just setting up some basic ground rules. This is not a therapy session, this is not anything like that. You're not going into massive amounts of ground rules, we're not writing ground rules on a whiteboard. You're literally just saying to people, we just need this short space of time to be undisturbed. Could you all make sure your phones are off? And could you all make sure you don't need to go anywhere else in the next 20 minutes? Yeah? Through to that exploration phase. So you're looking for a brief narrative of the event. You're looking for the what happened. Tell me about your experience of what's just happened or what happened in the last 6 hours, that event. You're looking for facts. So you're looking for clarifying questions. What happened? Where were the people? Who was around? What was happening factually in that kind of space of time. And you're looking for that from different people, from different sources of information, and often you'll get slightly conflicting views of kind of who thinks who was where and who thinks what was what. What you're looking for is you don't need everybody to agree completely, but what you're looking for is a general group consensus. And again, that's back to what you're trying to do is unfragment the memory-making process. You're looking to create a shared narrative of the detail that people can then hold on to and will stick with them and is being processed not during active trauma. You want some exploration of the emotion linked to the event, so you want to be able to recognise and acknowledge that emotion. You want to be able to then get into the phase where you are talking about the emotion. This can be quite a kind of a dominantly led model. You are looking to position yourself in a position of authority. You are looking to be the person that is there to help them stabilise. Unlike a lot of other types of sessions that we do, where we are very aware of power dynamics and we want to think about we don't want to be in a position of power and those sorts of things. Actually, it's okay to situate yourself somewhat in that position at this moment, because that's generally what people will need. In terms of that emotion, what you're looking for, again, so that recognition, that acknowledging it, that recognition of how difficult it is, without it becoming hugely emotional and the whole thing being dominated by the emotion of it. So you're allowing space for it without it becoming overwhelming. You're looking to pick up on themes kind of in that information phase. So you're looking for, so you might be writing notes, you might be thinking about this person said this or this person's talked about these emotions. Those are the things that I then need to talk about when I come to give information back. Assess, note, and need additional help. So if you spot somebody in the room that you just think you're not coping, you need additional help, that's where you'll be kind of noting that and dealing with that separately. Avoid at this stage the impulse to give normalisation information to be too kind of responding and reflective in that. It's really hard for me. I find this really hard to try out. My instinct, as people say, is to go, yeah, that must be really tough, and yeah, that's very normal to feel like that and to do that. The place for that will come, but it's not here. Right now, you just want people kind of exploring the facts and the feelings. Group members share the experiences only as much as they wish, and again, you're looking to build that shared narrative for the group, not just the individual. Some ideas of prompt questions, kind of the first thing you noticed, what were others in the team doing, down to into the feelings, how are you feeling right now about it, how did that feel at the time, how do you feel right now, those sorts of questions. What you're then looking to do is draw people back up into thinking, away from the feeling and into the thinking. It can be a tricky thing to do. Some people want to sit in that emotional phase, they want to just sit in the emotions of it. You want that to be a fairly gentle process. You want that to be a kind of slowly leading them towards the information. Some people will slip back slightly, back down that model. They'll start to talk about emotion again. It's about just drawing them back to the information, and this is where you use that normalising process. So if somebody starts to talk about the emotion again, this is where you can then start to say, yeah, we sort of, obviously that emotion came up, didn't it? And as we're talking about, it's very normal to feel that. A lot of people will feel that. Most people will recover in that way, and you're starting to draw them back into that information phase. This is where you can really normalise, look at reactions. It's not unusual to experience this. This, you want to try and use the things that people have talked about. Equally, you may want to add things in, so if they haven't talked about getting very upset or being tearful or those sorts of things, you can absolutely add that information and talk about the things that are common in this. You want to facilitate the connection with staff and peer groups, so it's really easy to feel fractious with colleagues, with that sense of sort of people almost waiting to feel blamed, people thinking, well, we did our bit over here, what was somebody else doing and where was that? But actually you want to facilitate that kind of shared goal, shared approach to things if you can. You're identifying the key things that staff need to feel safe. It's okay to ask them, what do you need? What do you need to feel safe going back into the workplace again? As we talked about at the start, this is adaptive functioning. You're trying to get them back into that workplace. You want to teach the key stress survival skills, which we've got a little bit more on. You're just giving really basic advice, really basic reconnection stuff and kind of normal life activities that they can do. Emphasising self-care, rest, family life, all the kind of normal strategies that they'll use. You can have written info ready to provide. We'll provide you with some written stuff that you can give and bits like that, and there's a whole wealth of resources. If COVID has been useful for anything, it's that there is now a much kind of larger database of things you can draw on and resources you can point people toward and sort of self-help type bits. And you can also offer this additional help at this point, this kind of one-on-one stuff, the check-ins, being able to check in with people. It's okay to say, we may need to do that further down the line. You can offer that to the group. You can kind of say, if anybody does want further support on a one-on-one, please come and talk to me, or these are the resources you can draw on. Or if you just think there's somebody in there, it's okay to approach them afterwards and say, come on, can I just have a quick chat with you? You didn't seem okay in there. Just prompt intro for that. Thinking about places of safety. Is home their place of safety? How are they going to continue to feel safe at home? Home might not be their place of safety. Somewhere else might be that they need to go and they need to feel. Thinking about their reliving, talking about it as a safety mechanism, as I did at the start there. Thinking about the brain and mind needing time to catch up to events. We often process. We need to sleep to process. We need to do those things. Being able to talk about that. Common trauma experiences, that sleep disruption, irritability, etc. As Will mentioned at the start, there is a very high recovery rate for this kind of stuff. The vast majority of people that experience acute trauma and distress will not go on to develop PTSD or post-trauma symptoms. And it's okay to tell people that, and that can be incredibly reassuring for them. Peer discussion, shared experience are helpful, so encouraging people to talk about those things. If they want to talk about it as a peer group outside of things, that's okay. And who are they connected with in the workplace? So who can they go to? Who can they talk to? Who do they feel able to rely on? That may not be the people that you expect. You may not even want to facilitate that as a discussion. You might just want to say to them, maybe think about who you can connect to in the workplace, who you can have conversations with and feel comfortable with. Just thinking about positive coping strategies that I was talking about there. Again, I won't run through all of these, these are kind of just there for information. But kind of being able to share as you're willing, talking at your own pace, all the normal things, taking the time to grieve, to cry, to let feelings out, to do those things. listening to other people talk about things or not. Some people don't want to listen to other people talk about things, and that's okay too. Spend some time doing the normal things in daily life. Normal life activities is often the big one here. Just being able to reconnect with the things that normally make you feel okay. That's a big part of stabilisation. But those are just some examples. Things to avoid, going beyond that 20 to 30 minute mark. You're straying into something quite different if you're going into that, if this is becoming a much bigger thing. That should be a kind of a warning sign for you that actually one or more people in that group might need something bigger than that later down the line, but actually you're deliberately being quite containing here, and it's okay to be a little bit deliberately kind of nudging towards the different phases and getting people to do that rather than sitting and spending too long in one. That's where you're avoiding getting into too much detail. The place for that is later, but actually you want to avoid too much detail because if people naturally process some of this stuff out, then they do. You want facts, you want the basic feelings of it, but then you don't want to get into vast amounts of detail that people still have to then go and process. It's not a therapy session. Nobody's expecting anybody in this room or anybody using this to be a therapist to provide that role. That's not what this is. This is just about diffusion. Delving too deeply in the emotional phase or seeming like to check on practice. We've already touched on that. Just some bits about when to follow up. If you're seeing an absence of appropriate emotion, if you're seeing somebody that's just not seeming to respond at all to what would be a very emotional event or what other people are experiencing as a very emotional event, obviously with the caveat of everybody responds slightly differently, everybody processes in their own way, but if you're really seeing an absence there, it could be a warning sign for the future. Or excessive emotions, somebody running extremely emotionally because of it. Expression of inappropriate emotion, that sense of unfinished business, so people just feel like they can't get themselves out of it, even after the debrief and after they've had a few days to think through that, if they're still feeling connected to it, or like they should be doing something different. Withdrawal, not communicating, particularly during that diffusion phase. Thinking about for that kind of group process, so if you need to think about further debriefing for people that happen slightly later down the line, if you're using this model, that's where you would then be drawing on kind of critical incident, stress management, debriefing type stuff, which should be with a trained practitioner at the very least to be able to do that. For individual support, just looking towards that kind of further psychological first aid support over the long term, possibly looking towards therapeutic input, but that comes quite a way later down the line. There's a lot of information all at once. Very aware this is a bit didactic for you. Any questions on that stuff? Seems straightforward. Shouldn't, in theory, seem like anything hugely novel to you. The components of what you've described, of different hot debriefs, cold debriefs, things you've come across, etc., they're all contained within this stuff. Yeah. The main bit here is to focus on the kind of giving you a bit of a model type structure that you can work to, and the prompt information that you can then use. It's okay to sit with notes on your knee that kind of say, this is my prompt info for different phases, and this is how I might get from one to the other. It's also okay for this to go wrong, for people to drag you into different phases and bits like that. Not about it being a perfect process by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, you're just doing the best you can with the group that you have. Anything anybody wants to ask? Easy. Okay. So, this is where we get put on the spot. What we thought might be helpful for you is just to do a kind of rough demo of this. Yeah? I'm going to do this. Lucky me. It's not going to be perfect. It's very deliberately not going to be perfect. It never is. So I'd rather show you this as it may well be. What we're going to ask you to do is maybe just think of an example that you can come up with. Please try not to make that too raw or recent. Don't want to upset anybody in the room, or because this is recorded, linked to anything that somebody may then watch on training and feel reconnected to. And we may not do justice to your experience, but we'll just go through some common experience stuff. Okay?
We basically wanted to prove that we haven't rehearsed this in any way. So we'll get you guys to give us a scenario, and then it evidences that we have absolutely just been here.
So, thank you for coming in. I guess I've been asked to come in and just have a chat with you as a bit of a group, because there's obviously been something quite difficult you've been through today, just to introduce how I'm going to do that, yeah, I'm going to run through a few different kind of stages of doing this with you today. So I'm going to ask you some kind of factual questions about what happened and go through kind of where you were, what was going on, those sorts of things. And then I'm going to ask you kind of how you're doing with it, what's going on, and then try and provide you just with some really basic information that might help you go through that. I appreciate it's obviously feeling very raw for you right now. It's feeling very active for you right now. And obviously we just want to connect you with anything that might help. Okay, would that be okay? Yeah. You need to feel free to talk as much or as little as you like. Yeah? This is all completely confidential. Yeah? The only time that there would be an exception to that is if I thought there was a risk to yourself or others, much like anything else. Yeah? And feel free to talk about anything like that. Okay. Yeah? We're not going to be here for very long at all. This will be probably about 20 minutes, something like that. And then we'll just kind of let you go and do what you feel like you need to do. Okay. Would that be okay? Yeah. So, does one of you want to kind of tell me what happened today?
We had a death in the department. So there was a child who came in and was just gone. And then we had to get the parents in, and the parents were just, you can imagine.
Sure. Who was around at that point? It's okay.
I was with the parents for the most part, while Charlotte was looking after the child. So I was just trying to keep the parents calm as best I could, really.
So I'm asking where you were at that point.
It feels like a bit of a blur to me, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm just feeling really overwhelmed. I feel overwhelmed now, actually, like being here. I'm finding that really hard.
Yeah.
I just feel a bit frustrated because I don't feel like it was all managed well. I felt very on my own with the whole situation.
Yeah, I felt.
How it obviously feels quite close right now. What kind of time of day was this happening?
It was about an hour ago. I left the department.
Yeah, about an hour ago.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe an hour and a half. 2 hours. Maybe 2 hours.
Yeah. Okay. What do you both remember about what was happening around? Was it lots of people? Was it just a few of you?
I felt like it was just two of us. I don't know. I don't remember there being that many people around.
Yeah, like I dragged the parents into the family room to just get them out of the way, because the mum was just screaming, and I thought she's going to be, other people or other patients around and what have you. So yeah, I just dragged mum and dad into the family room and just tried to keep them in there for a while.
So we've got the child being resuscitated, and we've got parents in family room at that point. Yeah, and you're sort of having to move people around, do those sorts of things. What happened next?
I think that was when more people came in.
Okay.
Yeah, then there was a lot more of the team. I know I just said I felt like I was on my own. I don't know. Then there was a lot more people there.
So more people came in at that point.
Yeah.
I was on my own for a long time. We didn't really know what was going on, because obviously we were in the family room. So it took a long. We didn't know what was happening until one of the doctors came in and spoke to the parents.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was horrible.
What will they have been talking about?
Who? Sorry.
When they were going in to speak to the parents, what were they doing?
The doctor came in to just explain that the child had died and that there was nothing more they could do, and that they were sorry, and just all that kind of stuff.
I just think for me, all I can just only hear how upset the parents were, and I felt so I just felt really helpless. I felt like I wasn't doing anything.
What can you hear them saying or doing?
They were just saying that it couldn't be that way because the child hadn't been ill for very long.
Yeah.
And that we must have it wrong.
Yeah.
She was just screaming, wasn't she? She was just really, really, really.
Yeah.
The dad was very, like, I think the dad upset me more because he was just quiet. He was just like, no, like he just couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what came next?
I feel like that was when people started to retreat a little bit, and it was a more intimate group. People took themselves off. The family were taken somewhere quieter.
Yeah. Yeah. So me and you took the family in so they could see the child and be with them for a little while.
Yeah.
Obviously before the reports came and everything.
Yeah. So you took them in to be with the child.
Yeah, to say goodbyes
And then at some stage they'll come out of that?
Yeah. I think I felt like I just wanted to stay with them for longer.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like...
Did you stay with them for longer, or did you...
No, I needed to take some time. I was really struggling, actually, throughout the whole thing. Because I have a small child, and all I could think about was ringing to check that my child was okay. And I felt a little bit guilty, maybe, because I could only really think about myself.
So you were doing a lot of thinking about that at that point?
Yeah.
Do you mind asking, did you make that call?
Yeah, I made that call.
So you took yourself away and made that call?
Yeah, and I felt like that was what I needed to do at that point. Just because my little one's not been very well. So it just felt very raw for me, and it's hard to separate.
Sure. Is it still feeling raw for you both now?
Yeah. I tuned out a bit there. I don't know. I think because I left the parents, and then I had to go straight into another bay and help another patient with something. So then I almost didn't get any thinking time. I had to go, and it was just something like I just literally had to go in and sort of turn the monitor off. I didn't do anything big, but I just had to go and be like normal with another person straight after, and then.
Yeah, sure.
So I think I just kind of had to put my front on and kind of get on with it really. Yeah. And then I'll come in.
Yeah. You said there you feel a little bit zoned out. When did that start?
I think I didn't really hear a word you just said then. Sorry. I'm just really
That's okay. That's how I felt during everything that was happening. I felt like I was somewhere else as well. I feel like I don't really remember. I just remember how I was feeling.
Yeah. And how's that feeling now for you? Are you still feeling the same things that you were then, or have things kind of changing over time in the last couple of hours?
I'm really annoyed, if I'm honest. Like I was left in that room with the parents for what felt like forever, and we had no idea what was going on. We knew that he probably died, but we just got no information, and it took ages for anyone to come and tell us what was going on. So I was just trying to keep them calm, trying to console Mum as best I could. But how do you even do that? I don't even.
It must have been quite an enclosed feeling for you. Sort of
I was
in
just
there,
stuck in there with them. I couldn't get out. I couldn't leave them. I've no idea how long I was there for, but it felt like hours.
Yeah. A sense of time going quite slowly, that real feeling of it being a long time.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with you? Or?
Yeah, I feel like that. I feel like I'm just still stuck in that room a little bit. And I think I'm just, I suppose, struggling with the thoughts around what that family is going to be going through now. I think I'm still stuck with them, which I'm finding hard. I don't know how I could go back to work now, still thinking about my little one and their little one, and I feel guilty. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know if I feel so annoyed, but I definitely felt like I was on my own. I definitely felt the same thing around that.
Lots of thoughts racing there.
Yeah.
You mentioned some guilt there. You mentioned some feeling on your own with it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I feel a little bit better now that it's us together. But I'm just a bit worried about the rest of my shift or about going home. I don't know.
Does some of that feel similar to you?
Yeah, I've nearly finished now. I'm due to go home after this anyway, but I don't know if I don't quite know if I'm ready to go home. I don't really want to go to an empty house. I might stay on for a bit actually and just see if I can help with something.
So at the moment you both described either a kind of aloneness there or a not wanting to be alone there. Yeah. Okay. How does it feel being asked questions about this at the moment?
I'm glad somebody's asking. But I don't know. I just feel a bit. I feel like we're not giving you good answers because I'm not really.
Yeah, I feel
sure
like you
what
need to ask us this in like a week when I've processed it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm still a bit spaced out. I think that those words were how I feel as well.
Yeah, sure. And I think everything you're describing there, that sense of feeling a bit spaced out, feeling like it's hard to answer questions at this point because it's all very active and it's all very kind of spinning around in your mind. That's a very normal thing to be feeling at this point. And as you said there, asking questions in a week or things like that, that may well come. That may well be the thing. But right now it's just kind of scoping out how things are right now. And just being able to, to say to you that what you're going through is perfectly reasonable for what you've just experienced today. Yeah. Have you been through anything like this before?
I think in the nature of what we do, this is stuff that we come across all the time. But
sure.
For me, I just think it's a bit too close to home, and I'm worried I won't want to come back in tomorrow.
Okay. What are the things that normally help you both, sort of individually, to be able to deal with this stuff on a daily basis?
Wine.
Yep.
Gin.
And professionally, I can't recommend wine and gin, but I'm not going to tell you that it's the wrong thing either.
I think just being probably with my family, but I feel like this is a really hard thing to talk to them about.
Of course.
But I don't want to upset my partner in any way and make them worry. So I don't know. You could go for a run, but it's just I'm so tired. I feel tired as well. It's hard to know what's right to do, isn't it?
It feels very hard to know what the right thing is now at the moment, and it may well be different for each of you. That home sounds like it's a bit of a place of safety for you, and introducing a bit of unsafety might not feel very helpful right now. But you described kind of going home to an empty house and wanting to avoid that. Yeah, it may well be at this point both of you just finding somewhere that does feel safe to you, somewhere that you can go. It might be somebody that you can talk to, or just being able to be around someone where you don't need to talk if that's what you need right now. Yeah. Are there any other things that you tend to do that help clear your mind a little bit or help take your mind away from things?
I think the drive usually helps me a little bit.
Sure.
I think ultimately I'm probably going to need to talk to somebody else. I don't think I'm going to manage it well without doing that.
Yeah. You'll have obviously been through some of these things before, but each event can affect us differently and can tie into different things in our history. But there are some common things that we go through. I suppose, just to give you some basic information on this stuff really, it's worth you knowing that this experience is incredibly common for people. These feelings and thoughts and the thoughts racing are incredibly common for people. The vast majority of people that go through that will come out of it the other end okay. Yeah. There's a really high rate of people that have these experiences and actually manage to process them over time. That said, some people need support later down the line, and that's okay too. And that can be about whether a particular event has just touched you more than normally would, for whatever reason. Yeah. And it's okay to later down the line to be able to say, as you're saying, I might need further help down there. You mentioned in there this sense of thoughts racing at the moment and thinking about what could have happened, connection to other people in life and bits like that. One of the things that our minds often do when we experience something quite traumatic is they play out events. It plays out it goes over the situation that we've just been through again and again and again, and it also goes through situations that could have happened or might happen in other situations or bits like that. What it's doing there is trying to keep you safe. It's trying to show you that something very traumatic and very difficult has happened, and it doesn't want it to happen again. So it's trying to run through those events to try and show you different things that you might be able to do or bits like that. And actually sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes it can be quite unhelpful, but it's the only way that our mind knows to do things.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just going over it and over it again,
Yeah.
again and again. And again.
Yeah. And again, that's incredibly normal at this point. What normally happens is, sorry, I use that word normally a lot, but what commonly happens is that as you do that, alongside that, your body and your brain get used to the idea that you are now safe. So there's no active threat. So you'll be familiar with the idea of adrenaline in your system, and right now there'll have been a lot of it, and you'll be coming down the other side of that. And as that adrenaline decreases, and as you sleep and you get rest and those sorts of things, your body slowly comes out of this threat phase and into more of a stable phase. And as you stop feeling the active threat, then it stops replaying normally. Yeah. You might still get it sometimes, so it might replay it a little bit again, but not as frequently. But commonly that's what happens. But it's doing its job right now to try and keep you safe, even though it's a very difficult thing to be going through. Yeah. Is there anything that either of you or both of you need to be able to feel that you can come into work? Obviously you mentioned it feeling very difficult to potentially come back into work. Is there anything that would help you at the moment with being able to do that?
It's hard because I feel like I don't really have a choice.
Sure.
I don't know whether I'll just feel better once I've had a good night's sleep and I've seen my family.
Okay.
I can be at home for a bit of time.
Okay. Test it and see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just before I come in here, my manager said, like, she was just like, "Are you all right?" And like, "That was a really shit day. Are you all right?" And even just hearing that was helpful. And she said, like, if I want to either come in on a different shift tomorrow or not be on the shop floor or something for a day or two, then
sure.
So I said I'd have a think about it. So for tomorrow, that's
Sure.
helpful.
So there might be some ways you can adapt slightly. Yeah. Do you kind of have people in the workplace that you tend to connect a bit with, that you tend to, when things are difficult, that you tend to talk to a bit more and bits like that? Which you don't have to tell me about them, but I'm just, do you feel like you kind of have some colleagues or people?
Yeah. There's like, a few people who've like, even just on my way here, just who grabbed me and like gave me a hug and were just like, "Are you all right?" Like that
Sure.
kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
I don't talk to too many people about, but there's definitely one or two that I speak with.
Okay. Sometimes just having those people in the workplace that share some of your experiences and past experiences, it's not necessarily getting their experience, but it's just about being able to know that you can talk it through with somebody that understands the facts and the things that happen and the way that it can be in the environment. Yeah. Would it be okay if I kind of either give you some resources now or send you out some resources that you can look at? It might be things that you find you don't need, but there would just be things you can draw on there, people you can contact if you do feel like you need more support and bits like that.
Yeah.
Would that be okay?
That's fine.
Yeah. That's probably about it from me for today. Is there anything you want to ask me before we wrap this up?
I guess like if we wanted to speak to you again, is that okay? Yeah.
So what we'll normally do is we'll let you take a little bit of time to process, and if you need further kind of one-on-one, then I can have a chat to you about the best way to do that and what might need with support, but we'll make sure that that support's in place for you if you need it. And there's a few different ways you can access that.
Okay.
That'd be okay. Thank you. Done.